Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, and as I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. And of course, that is our goal. The heat is on. I want to talk about several areas of real heat. We're seeing it now in climate. Here we are, it's Juneteenth, actually. Juneteenth, a very important day in our history. And here we are facing the challenge of a heat wave in the United States that is unprecedented. No one can say that there is no such thing as global warming. No one can say that there is no such thing as climate change. And we may argue forever about what the cause of this disaster is. Humans, natural warming, well, it's all a moot point. The point is that we face a climate crisis. Interestingly enough, for years on KGO, I argued that this was the existential threat to human existence. And some of you who are listening to the sound of my voice right now will remember those who called and said, global warming is not a problem. It doesn't exist. It's a myth. Well, we know that global warming is real. Now, here's the question. What can we do, if anything, to mitigate the effects? Why do I say mitigate? Because, well, take a look. Hurricane season is about to begin. Massive heat waves in the Midwest, an effect, no doubt, on our farmers, on our laborers, an effect on all of us. And of course, the seas are rising. And the question becomes, is anybody talking about it? Now, I know you can't solve the problem. I'm not foolish enough to believe that a politician speaking out could solve the problem. But I do believe that there are things we can do to mitigate the impact. That means that we have to think about what we need to do community by community. Here in San Francisco, in Northern California, we're talking about seawalls, building them higher, more effectively. We're talking about more reservoirs so that there can be greater water resource. We're talking about rebuilding infrastructure because we know that in the days ahead, our infrastructure is going to be severely tested by this crisis. I raise this question now because the candidates for president and for most political offices are not talking about climate crisis, but it's here. I'm very lucky. I live in San Francisco. We are an air-conditioned city. So far, well, the breeze is still blowing and everything seems to be relatively normal. But we know that the seas are rising. We know that we need emergency preparation. We know that we are not immune from the impact that this will have on agriculture in California, which will affect all of us directly. In short, the world had better start thinking about what we can do. And politicians, including candidates for president, ought to be acknowledging that the climate deniers were wrong. And I'm addressing this particularly to my friends in the Republican Party who denied that there was any problem. Remember former Senator Jim Imhoff? I interviewed him several times. He said there was no climate crisis. There is a climate crisis. The heat is on, and it's growing, and it's going to make for a long, hot summer. Speaking of a long, hot summer, there is now the reality of an axis of evil in the world. Now, that's right. We know who they are. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. We understand that there really are threats to the world. And you can add to that axis of evil radical Islam, the terrorists of Hamas, Islamic Jihad. There is a coalition which exists in the world now, which represents a major threat. Did you watch the parade in celebration of Vladimir Putin that took place in North Korea? It is an extremely poor country. with tremendous problems. And yet, the extravagant reception for Vladimir Putin and the agreement that they agree with Putin on foreign policy, that they will continue to stand with Russia in Ukraine, this should concern everyone in the world. Remember, and I say this bluntly, Russia, China, North Korea, and potentially Iran will all have access to nuclear capability. We live in a dangerous world in which things are heating up. And in the foreign policy debate, which will take place during this presidential campaign, we'd better stop and think about whose finger we want on the nuclear trigger. We better stop and think about whose decision will affect climate, the Paris Accords, who took us out, who put us back in. I say this because the world faces serious crises, and these crises, even if they're not completely solvable, need to be addressed during this presidential campaign in a serious, thoughtful way. I think that is the lesson when I say the heat is on. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague. You can interact with me on Facebook and on LinkedIn. We want to make you think, and we want all of us together to try to come up with real solutions. I want to say a special debt of thanks to the wonderful producer of this podcast, Go-Go Zoger, and to all of you. Let's hope tomorrow is a better day. Let's remember what Juneteenth means. Freedom. That's what it means.